Welcome to another edition of Market Impact Insights, your podcast source for business leadership perspectives to help your business grow. Hear from experts in marketing, sales, business strategy, and more, with practical advice for business success. Make sure you won't miss the latest episodes by visiting marketimpactnow.com. Now, here's your host, Dan Albaum.
Welcome back to another amazing episode of Market Impact Insights. Today's topic is one that's really near and dear to my heart because it's really about the role of marketing in supporting the growth and helping drive that growth for companies, and really taking a long-term view of that, of creating meaningful demand generation, being able to help really inflate and grow brand visibility, all those good things. And my guest today is someone who I first met in an incredible community, the CMO Coffee Talk, and he has always been just spot on and provides deep perspectives on all things marketing strategy. And it's the perfect time to bring David Kirkdorffer onto Market Impact Insights, because he's got this incredible depth of experience as a marketing consultant, decades of experience, in fact, driving demand generation and brand visibility. He's worked with at least 23 startups and 5 public companies, and his focus is on helping technology businesses prepare for the future of buyer enablement. He's an advisor to CMOs on increasing their brand's presence within a variety of different AI models, such as ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Copilot, Perplexity, the whole gamut. And of course, we know this is the new battleground for discoverability. And so it really comes back to how can we be a meaningful growth engine as marketers? David, I can't wait for the conversation. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And what a wonderful introduction. I really appreciate that. I almost sound impressive.
Well, you've had this really interesting career in and around marketing. And what originally sparked your passion to even go down the marketing trail?
Well, that's really a great question. So I went to BU and I actually studied marketing as an undergraduate. It was one of the few undergraduate programs that had that kind of businessy focus back then. I came into my first role in marketing working for my marketing research professor, an Australian man called John Martin, who was a bit of a influence on my career. He was a student of Kotler. And so as a teacher, teaching classes, and as the leader of a market research firm in Boston, he was a great person to be learning a lot from. So my kind of introduction and journey into marketing started with market research. And interestingly, that company in Boston, Chadwick Martin Bailey, is still in business and doing great business. Whereas so many of the startups that I've worked for over the years, as is the way with startups, are not, which is just one of those ironies. So that's how I got started. And I got my second job was working at a software company that was called Software House, which you might imagine would be a pretty difficult URL to get nowadays. This was in the days before people worried about URLs. And that was a database company. They provided a technology to build that was a database, a relational database environment that companies could build applications within. And, I've just been following the technology since then.
Yeah. So it sounds like the technology part of it was really something that just really motivated you specifically versus other industries or markets you might have chosen to apply your skills into.
I kind of chanced into technology. It seemed like it would be cool. It was new at the time. Mm-hmm. Certainly there weren't very many software companies around. And the types of people working at the software company seemed like fun. It wasn't the type of place where you needed to wear a suit and tie, initially, at least. That did become a fashion. The the idea that you were sharing something that was new, that people were trying to understand more about. And back then, there were very few information sources to learn about technology. So you essentially, as a buyer, really very much went to the analysts of that day, which would have been the Gartners of the day, and you went to the vendors. You ended up speaking to sales reps because there were no websites, there were no review sites, there were very few places to learn about technologies and capabilities. And of course, you learned through trade shows. There were lots of trade shows that were very large at that time that helped buyers become introduced to technologies. And there was a thriving press that was the way back in those days.
Yeah, it's amazing to reflect on just how much that, I'll call it the balance of power, right? Or information accessibility has shifted to now, right? There's
Absolutely.
no longer, hey, we've got you hostage in terms of information. We're your sole source. Now, of course, we know buyers can be so much more educated before we ever even have that first contact with them. It's just night and day.
Exactly the case. I mean, today, the whole promise of the internet and the World Wide Web was to provide information transparency, and that went as far also to touch B2B buyer-seller relationships. And there's plenty of research today that would share with us the finding that our buyers have already done a lot of work by the time they reach out to us. Notably, the work from Kerry Cunningham over at 6 Sense is one of the people who, if you are looking for someone to follow on LinkedIn, he's a great person to follow. He shares a lot of great information. And he has in his research, he's found that, for example, the first company actually contacted by a buyer, when they do get to that point where they're reaching out to speak to a short list of consideration prospects, that first contact to the first vendor is typically the vendor that will win in the 70 to 80% rate.
Interesting. Yeah. So timing is everything, right? We've been saying that forever.
Well, it certainly helps if you are answering questions that buyers have on their mind, and in a way that they can freely access and find, because sometimes our websites are a bit like a treasure hunt. So if the buyer can find the information they're looking for and easily have access to it, that is to say, it's not gated. They do not need to provide some fake email address just to kind of get the information. That really, really helps, because they are, in essence, selecting you. They are already going through all the filters of, is this a good fit for our situation? Is this the kind of business and company that would fit our kind of company? So imagine you're a 50-person shop and you're looking for a database. You may not want to look at Oracle, not because the product is or isn't good, but because perhaps the organizational mismatch may exist, right? They're looking to understand if the technology is a technology that they can suitably digest in their environment with their people, their tech stack, their workflows. And they're trying to understand if they would be successful reaping some kind of economic benefit. Would it all pay off in the end, given the price of the solution, the upheaval, the training, the learning, the implementation, all those types of costs? So when the information on our websites is helpful to answer those core questions that all buyers essentially have without needing to speak with us, then we help them move on. We help them succeed in answering these questions. And so that's become a lot of the focus of my work, is to trying to have this buyer enablement, if you will, point of view. So, yes, let me stop there.
Yeah. So when you reflect back on your own journey, what's been some of the biggest personal learning you've taken from it? And have there been surprises for you along the way?
So that's a great question. We learn something and then it becomes assumed and acquired and then forgotten. How many times have we had to relearn the same thing? What have I learned reflecting on my journey? I don't know the whole truth and the only truth. I need to fight for my thoughts and opinions, but I need to recognize that there are other thoughts and opinions too, and that they're equally valid. So I may have a concept or an idea or a point of view, and I need to express it, but I need to work. I work within a team. As if I'm leading a marketing group, I'm doing that within the overall go-to-market, the sales team, the leadership team, the team itself, various ecosystem extenders like agencies and contractors and so on. So keeping an open mind, listening, and taking the time to share and share again where you're coming from so that people can more fully understand it. Earlier in my career, I would be passionate about an idea and it would be kind of like my way or the highway. Perhaps that's a failing of mine, or perhaps it's a failing of youth, or perhaps both. Different people obviously have got their own bumps along that trajectory. As I've grown older, I learned to hold the wheel a little less tightly. The point is to go in the right direction. It's not about winning every battle. It's about helping kind of take the overall game forward. So that's one learning. Perhaps it sounds more metaphysical than marketing oriented. The thing that I keep coming back to, or has become my North Star, is this notion of helping buyers find what they're looking for. Anytime our language aims to persuade, aims to try and make someone believe what we believe, buyers are just very reticent to take that in, especially the technical buyers who a lot of my marketing has been directed to. They have over the years become more and more skeptical of the various things that vendors will say.
Yes.
So, and for good reason, they've been burned, and nobody wants to be the person who bought this technology that was perhaps a great technology, but just wasn't the good fit for their organization. So I'm trying to be more buyer centric and what's on their mind and what do they need. And we're not trying to write technical documentation, but at the same time, we have to provide information that helps them with evidence and method. These are two words I would kind of throw into the conversation. Evidence of a success, and the method being how. How was this done? How is this working? So that buyers get a feeling for how this might fit in their environment. Because that's what they're really looking at as they're evaluating us.
Yeah. I mean, just starting with getting inside of and respecting and understanding and being able to define what those needs are in the minds of the customer. When you start there, good things can happen. And one of the things that's been almost a holy grail during my marketing career was always this pursuit of this precision around attribution, that if we can just demonstrate how marketing is really making a difference in terms of really changing or getting these behaviors of buyers going. And if we can get some sort of measured attribution, then we'll prove the value of marketing. And it was always this continuous chase to do that. Something that you've said that's real interesting is that chasing a mirage is a lot like, going after this attribution measurement. Can you explain that a little bit more?
So I talk about the marketing attribution mirage, right? So it's a fun notion. It's, you think you have it and then it's not there. Attribution is something that's existed in advertising all the time, right? It started out when there would be TV advertising and there would be a need to be able to show that the advertising had some kind of impact. And there used to be awareness advertising, right? Did you see the ad? Do you remember the ad? There would be unaided and aided awareness. And that was kind of where this came from, to try and prove an impact. And advertisers wanted to be able to obviously show that they were memorable, that the brand ideas were memorable, and so forth. When Google came along and provided Google advertising, it allowed for a certain and user trackable codes. We ended up with an ability to track the influence of individual creatives. And individual creative tracking is like a level of granularity that nobody had prior to that. And the fact that it was kind of all digital and online made people feel as if it was very modern and error-proof. It wasn't subject to interpretation. And so there was a big rush to move towards digital attribution. And digital attribution definitely measures something interesting. It measures what's happening in the digital domain. And so it is a portion of the overall human experience, if you will, of learning about products and solutions and so forth. However, we over-indexed on it. And the only attribution that seemed to matter was the digital attribution, the things that happened online. And this was a way of helping justify the expenses we were in, or the investments we were making in various forms of digital promotion, whether they were PPC ads or banner ads, if anyone remembers those, email campaigns, and various other things that we can do online. And each vendor, of course, would provide some ability to attribute how its tool was working and meeting the goals and needs and justifying the investment in that tool. So the tools started getting good at measuring their own success and proving that they had value. And we ended up creating all sorts of new words and languages that have become part of our lexicon in marketing. But then buyers stopped clicking on things, which is a pain in the butt for us, because here we are spending money and they're not doing the things that we wanted, because they had learned that they became entrapped essentially in various campaigns and streams, and they were being they felt badgered, they felt harassed. After you click on a thing, you're going to see an endless stream of X and Y, or you're going to get phone calls and so forth. So all of a sudden, our impact might be there, but we couldn't measure it. There was this zero-click thing happening. Along comes, and this was starting in, I don't know, 2015 or so. It was beginning, maybe earliest days, where the whole go-to-market industrial complex had gotten so tuned up that buyers started kind of holding back on who they are and what they do. Yeah. And so when COVID came along, it opened up a whole other channel in a much faster way. You can talk about dark social. In fact, I think there was an article in The Atlantic back in as early as 2012 that introduced the idea of dark social. And the idea of dark social, as the Atlantic magazine journalist was writing about, was the Atlantic had this standard of creating URLs that were very long and based around the topic heading of the article. And so not the kind of thing that anybody would be typing in directly, right? Because they were just very long with hyphens and all sorts of things like that. And they noticed a certain kind of traffic was coming to them directly. And they were like, well, how could this be direct traffic if this is such a long URL? And they realized what was going on is people were forwarding emails to each other about, did you see this article? Here's a great article. Take a look at this article, that kind of thing. And so they called it dark social, where individuals were socially sharing ideas. Anyway, moving forward, with COVID, we all of a sudden were working from home, and we had access to Zoom as a way of communicating. There was nobody looking over our shoulder if we were working in an office, and we could reach out and connect with each other in a different way. We could ask each other questions like, what are you using to do this thing? All sorts of communities sprung up. They were there before, but of course it was like the whole thing just really blossomed and flowered. There were Zoom meetings that were popping up and all sorts of ways of connecting. And one of the connection points that marketers shared was, how are you doing this? What are you looking at? I'm thinking of doing a this or that type of project. Who are some vendors you would recommend? What are some things, if you've done one of these before, what should I look for? What are your learnings? And so we were sharing information. And our attribution models and our attribution tech doesn't pick up on any of that. It also doesn't pick up on other things that are happening that are not online. So the fact that you saw someone at a trade show, or that you read an article a while ago, or a partner introduced the idea to you, and so forth and so on. So we ended up with this situation where digital attribution was measuring one aspect of a learning environment and completely missing another. And why this is important is because our marketing investments started to all move towards what we could prove. And for good reason, right? We're trying to show that were as marketing leaders, that were stewards of the company resources and that were focused on success and we're not wasting money and so forth. So if you couldn't show attribution, you kind of edged away from wanting to use that tactic or that technique or that way of it going into the market. And we over-indexed. And I would offer, as I'm on my little ramble here, so thank you for your charitable listening, but what I think we might have discovered, or a more balanced view, would be to consider Chet Holmes and his buying hierarchy. And for those who are not familiar, he would have a kind of a pyramid structure where at the top, the pinnacle, if you will, the 3 to 5% of a market is in a buy now mode. They're in a situation where they're actively doing something about that right now and looking at solutions that might be a fit for their situation. Then there's another 7% underneath that could move into that 3 to 5%, but they're just not in that state that seems to make it urgent right now. And another 7% below that, defined as potentially in the next year or so, given their situation evolving. And then there's other bands at 30% and so forth. The digital attribution is essentially the capture mode, the capture channel, the way in which that 3 to 5% express themselves to the vendor community, and that the bands below those two 7% bands are in the what we might call create mode. That is to say, our influence marketing, the quality of our ideas, the learning and sharing and helpfulness that we can provide, however we provide it, is having an impact there. So trade shows, word of mouth, various thought leadership kinds of presence that you may have in social media, perhaps mostly in LinkedIn, given the focus of LinkedIn. And so that to have a proper attribution or a fuller attribution model, one needs to open up to this more or less digital approach. So how can we capture this less digital impact that we are hopefully making? Because good marketing is not just what happens through clicks and online activity. And the simplest way to do that is to add to our Contact Us form and our demo form, if that's the kind of business that we're in that provides demos, that type of thing, a simple, mandatory, open text field with no pull-down menus, right? No special direction apart from to ask the simple question, how did you hear about us? Ask that question. And all of a sudden you start to hear how people have heard about you. And it's not always because of the advertising, something that you did. It may not even be the thing that brought them to the demo page right at that moment. You may have an ad that brings them to the demo page, that, for example, if that's what you did. But the way they first heard of you wasn't particularly that ad, it was something else. And so that helps balance out getting that information, getting those signals. If you do a podcast, many companies do podcasts for good reason. It helps shape people's frame of understanding of a situation. It helps people understand how they can think of their situation in a way that helps them see it more clearly, perhaps, right? That's what many times we listen to podcasts for, is to get ideas. A podcast isn't something you can digitally attribute. How do you create a link between the thing you listened to on an Apple podcast a week ago and the fact that you're now going to their website? So that kind of channel can surface now. And so you can now justify your investment in doing podcasts. Because if you were just going strictly on digital attribution, there's no way to prove it.
Yeah.
So it's the
gives
balance.
You a much richer perspective in terms of evaluating your investments. And so I've got to throw this into the mix, obviously, David, because Spotlight is on it. Everyone's talking about it. There's so much noise. It's AI, right? AI everywhere. How do you see how AI is going to impact how marketers and business leaders move forward with their strategies and execution?
Yes, it's very topical. And The simple way I see this coming as a buyer enabler, if you will, is to think of this as the next evolution in buyer enablement. Many of us in the B2B world are familiar with sales enablement. That's when we give good information to our sales reps so that when they encounter situations in their buying cycles, they've got good stuff to inject into the conversation, ideas and helpful information so that buyers can help move forward. Of course, we call it sales enablement because from our vendor standpoint, we're trying to help the salesperson. Okay, all right, understandable. Why not? We're in a business. But then people were not speaking to our sales reps. So smart marketers said, well, we need to put this information on our websites because the questions still exist. It's just they don't want to talk to a sales rep first. Kerry Cunningham's research and all that. They're doing 80% of the work by themselves without talking to us. So if we can make sure that they get these answers to this information, then we're more likely to come through and they're more likely to reach out because they've determined that we're a good fit. So we might call that sales enablement stuff, reformulate it a little bit, repackage a little bit, and call it buyer enablement, and let's put it on our website. So now we might talk about AI enablement, because our websites are being disintermediated the same way as our sales reps were disintermediated. And that is to say, people don't come to websites the same way as they used to. The website experience for most buyers is not the best, right? Every website is set up differently. Every website has information kind of described in different ways, found in different places. And so it's a bit of a treasure hunt. And that, quite frankly, with everyone who's very busy, is from their perspective, is they feel like they're wasting their time. They might give more time to a well-known brand, thinking to themselves, well, they're well known for this stuff, so I just haven't found it yet. Let me keep on looking, right? Or if it's not a well-known brand, it's kind of just popped into their awareness, and all of a sudden they go to the website and they give up quickly, because if they can't figure out what this company does, who it's for, what the benefits are, what the uniques are that provide the buyer unique advantages for their business process, they just move on. So websites are a bit of a challenge to find information. Along comes LLMs and AI. And all of a sudden we can get answers to questions. The question, of course, becomes how much can we trust this information? We should talk about that. But LLMs and AI chat provides an ability for people to get information much more quickly than doing a bunch of Google searches. Google searches, we know from experience, we go in and out of different pages, hoping that that page, while it ranked highly, actually has the information in it that we're looking for. And if you're like me, most of the time you discover it has a bit, but it kind of doesn't. It kind of didn't. It was kind of a bit of a red herring. So you keep looking and you go in and out, and God bless Google for all the hard work that it's done, because it's so much better than the Yahoo kind of indexing that existed way before. And they do an amazing job of surfacing information that we're looking for. It's just that the experience of trying to extract the meaningful bits that we're looking for can be, well, it's work and it's not simple. LLMs just make it so much simpler. So it's easier now for a person to go to an LLM and say, here are the URLs of a couple of contenders that I'm looking for. Please do an analysis. Where are they similar? Where are they different? What are some key distinguishing capabilities or attributes that are unique to each vendor that are not spoken about? And tell me about what they seem to all say and do at the same time, similarly across all these websites. It gives you a quick and dirty way of understanding options. So that's just at the very highest level. And that has created a bit of an apocalypse situation for SEO folks, because they've measured so much of their, and this is attribution again, SEO attribution has been measured by clicks and visits. And the SEO community is going through the same kind of gnashing of teeth and tearing of their hair out as the demand gen community did maybe 5 to 10 years ago, when people were not responding to various programs because they realized they were going to be entrapped. Now, all of a sudden, the metrics used to justify SEO work, to attribute success, if you will, by visits and clicks and stuff, those metrics are kind of falling, they're collapsing. They're not trustable, or they're not complete. Maybe a better way of saying it. They're not complete. They're not measuring everything. but the numbers themselves are going down, so it makes it seem as if there's less value.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a changing landscape now, and we need to think differently in terms of not only buyer behavior and where are they going, where are they sourcing that information, and then how do we make our brand or our offer or product, service, whatever it is, how do we become visible through that new reality? And that can be high anxiety, can it? For a lot of these marketers.
Yes, it can be, because if so what succeeds with LLMs? Should we take the conversation there for a moment?
Yeah, a couple of quick bottom line, how do we need to be thinking about that?
Everything an LLM does is constrained by a budget of time. And time equals money. And we all know how quite famously, the LLM companies are burning billions of dollars, right? And so they want to do things as efficiently as possible. And the hallmark of efficiency for an LLM is clarity. The LLM process starts with understanding your query and understanding the intent behind your question or the situation you're trying to ask the LLM to help you resolve. I like to think about situations and resolving situations rather than questions. An LLM, as we know, will then take our base query and fire off a whole bunch of related queries around it. That's interesting. What is it doing? It's casting its net rather widely, try and say that quickly, David, rather widely, and gathering a lot of information, because it knows that a single question doesn't really capture the full scope of what this could be about. So it gathers a bunch of information, and then it does a competition of the best bits of the information that it has corralled. So it kind of gathers widely and then ruthlessly cuts. And it's cutting out information. What we're doing is it's looking for the ideas that relate to the situation it is trying to resolve. And the ideas that most closely align are the ideas that win on one level. Ideas that are also easy to extract. By the way, ideas that win need to be clear about what the idea is and easy to extract, because we know that LLMs synthesize answers by bringing together information from multiple sources and then constructing paragraphs and sentences with references back to source material. So to make it easy to extract, those ideas were presented in full sentences. Back in the day when we were in high school, at least in my American high school, I did the thing that was like diagramming the sentence. And of course, in those days, we got the colored pencils out, right? And we said, this is the object, this is the subject, this is the verb, this is the noun, and all those types of things. Well, LLMs are large language models, and they have learned the syntax of our language. And when we speak in complete sentences where there are all of the elements that you would require to have a complete sentence be present, then they can, just like with certain uses of commas, you can put this part ahead of that part and so forth, because these logical groupings make sense in almost any sequence if you've got the grammar and the punctuation done correctly. And when we do that, when LLMs encounter sentences that are complete and written that way, it becomes easier for them to extract pieces that they can compile with other pieces. So in this world of LLMs, they're efficient. They're looking for ideas that match the intent of the situation they're trying to resolve. They're extracting from the sentences that are complete and clear. And clarity has to do with the sentence being easy to extract and be meaningful in its own context without surrounding context. So some of our sentences may not make sense, but they did make sense because of that heading or because of the thing that came before it and after it. So there's that contextual completeness of its own idea. Then it puts together the ideas and presents things back to us. So that's the process. And it's doing all of this in milliseconds. So if our website is slow to paint, the website basically does the whole McLaughlin group. Anyone remember the McLaughlin group? The guy on anyway, bye-bye. it's the we're out of here. We're not waiting for this page to paint.
The train moves on without you.
The train moves on. So clearly I can talk about this in great detail, but the point is to show up in an LLM response. It starts with the clarity of ideas. We are competing in the realm of ideas, not keywords. For multiple reasons, keywords is no longer a way to think of things. It's more about the clarity of our ideas. We can do things to structure how we write about our ideas to make it easier for our ideas to pop through. There's this notion of chunking. And what is a chunk? Well, a chunk is an information idea. And then what is a chunk? Well, it has a beginning and an end, which means it's delimited. There's a marker, if you will, for the LLM to recognize this is where this idea begins. This is where the next idea begins. So I can segregate and separate individual ideas. And when we have individual sections and sub-subsections that focus on individual ideas, that helps a lot. If we have a section with too many ideas built into it, then it becomes very hard for the LLM to parse what is impacting what. And a simple example is if you take a look at any legal contract you've received, perhaps from your employer, and you read something that's got like 10 lines to it and realize eventually this is one massively long sentence. That is a complicated sentence to digest because it has so many ideas built into it. There's various qualifications and equivocations on what to be kind of looking out for, that the LLM can't really extract anything from that. But if that was put out as a set of 10 bullets, then maybe that becomes easier for each of the individual ideas to become digestible. So clarity is efficiency, and LLMs care about efficiency. And that is a simple way to look at it. So this is not just an SEO problem. This is a product positioning, messaging, articulation problem. SEO is a fabulously rich and important aspect of geo success. But if you are putting SEO structure around crappy sentences and indistinguishable ideas that are vaguely supported and don't show how they're true or real, it's not going to matter. All the SEO work that you do is going to kind of like, I hate the expression, but it's like putting lipstick on a pig a little bit. You've done the lipstick, but the actual idea itself is muddy, confused, and overstuffed.
Yeah. I mean, you're really just talking about the ultimate forcing function to get us to be much clearer, more concise, and just to think about structurally how we message. And so, yeah, it's happening, and we're seeing it if you go out to peruse websites, and you can see some of that evolution in terms of a new thinking to be more relevant. So, David, I want to shift over a bit and get into the rapid fire part of our conversation. These are questions I like to ask a lot of my guests.
Okay.
And you've led marketing teams in a variety of different organizations. One of the things I've heard is one of the hardest things that a leader can ever do is to first build or develop and then sustain a healthy culture. What's made a difference for you in order to do that?
So we learn from the examples we see, I guess. And I've had some great bosses over the years. And and can I be one of those people? What can I have learned from those great bosses?
Aspirational. Yeah.
You know, and the great bosses make me feel comfortable being me. I feel seen, heard, and supported. So what can I do then to help the teams I work with feel seen and understood and supported? It starts there, because when people feel comfortable, they do better. When they feel uncomfortable, they hold back. We don't want them to hold back. They may actually have a lot to say and share. So that's that place of essentially trusting your own team, or sharing that you trust them, sharing that and demonstrating that you take their thoughts and ideas to be meaningful. They're not just there to execute on projects, they're there to lead on projects. So there's that. And that's a lot of it, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's the
And it's
foundation.
harder now than, now that we, in my view, for me anyway, I find that that's harder to do in work from home than in the old days of going to an office. And perhaps that's part of why there's a bit of the pendulum swing, certainly within larger organizations, is to have more of the back in the office experience, because it can be easier to kind of create that a bit. Though, to be honest, in the largest of organizations, if any of you are listening to this working in that, so much of your team is all over the country anyway. So you do Zoom calls, and used to be those Polycom calls. Now they're Zoom calls. Anyway, so that's a great place to start. Another great place I would often kind of turn to, or is like I'd say to the folks, we do annual reviews or periodic reviews, and in that, and then we also do check-ins, right? We have a weekly meeting or a monthly meeting, depending on the group of the team and things. And the one-on-one time is really important. So I have found that it's helpful in my life to know that there's an anchor point. There is a weekly meeting with my boss, or every 2 weeks, or whatever it is, and that it is stable. And that is the chance that I have to share with my boss what's going on and my thoughts and so forth, right? This is my window. And so if I had a boss that would constantly shift and move this, that sent a signal to me that I wasn't as important as the thing that they were doing at that moment, which tended to make me feel less important. So having that type of schedule and sticking with it is helpful, whatever it might be. I mean, sometimes you're going to have to move things around. And by the way, it's a two-way street. The employee should be able to, I've got a project, something's coming up. Could we shift this from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, whatever. So maintaining that, because that structure is a sense of respect of process. And it's also an avenue of communication that someone might be relying on because they don't communicate other ways. That could be their style. And in those meetings, I try and set goals where sometimes the goal is not about just the company, but personal bullets on their resume. So you might say to someone, where would you like to be in a couple of years from now? What do you think you need to be able to move into that situational role? What bullets would you presumably like to add to your resume? Perhaps this is kind of a forcing function or a simplifying function. And then how can we get you into situations where you could maybe build the experience or the situation to do and to have that bullet on your resume? Sometimes it might mean, I would like to do more public speaking. Great. Maybe we should get you involved in Toastmasters. So, and trying to link back, of course, the personal development back to the benefit for the company and the benefit to the team. So if they'd like to become an Olympic swimmer, I'm like, well, that's great. I don't know that I can really contribute to that much, but maybe we can make allowances so that you can have training time if that's the purpose. However, you're being measured against these goals and so forth. So allowing there to be some kind of moments in the work that they're doing to not just be for the company, but something that they're doing that betters their individual career, and being supportive of that. So those are 3 ideas that I try to keep in mind when I'm working with teams and managing teams.
Yeah, I mean, you've really described this key to really separate exceptional leadership from just good enough. And it really begins with being focused on your team member first. It's putting them first and then being able to meet them really where they are and provide a meaningful engagement and probably a whole lot more listening, right? Asking questions and listening than it is about you as the leader talking.
That's absolutely right. And as you can imagine, for some people, I am quite talkative. So it's a bit of a strain for me sometimes. For listening, yes. But trying to be employee centric. Your team is who you are as a leader. So defending your team to other teams, right? Representing your team fairly, supporting the team is key. Then the team rallies behind the leader when they feel as if the leader is on their side, as opposed to a steward of managerial top-down imperatives. That never feels like the leader you want to work for. Then you feel as if you're working for a spreadsheet as opposed to working for people. I have always found I do my best work when I'm trying to do work for and with people, which makes it hard when you get laid off, right? which is what happens a lot in teams. And so one way to be a good leader during a layoff is to be helpful through that process too. Sometimes you're in a situation where you have to let people go. There's a downsizing that happens that goes beyond your control, or someone's not a fit in the team anymore. So delivering the information clearly and efficiently, and then trying to be helpful after the fact, not shunning the people as if they're lepers, somehow, oh, we can't talk to them anymore. It's like, no, you might have to be careful about how we say things, because there could be various legal situations, of course, to be respected. But we're working with people. We are people. Let's treat others how we'd like to be treated ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So, David, when you think about the future, what makes you optimistic?
The kids. The future is in our children. Though, we have kind of given them a bit of a messy plate to kind of pick up from, haven't we? So, I mean, it's the best of times and the worst of times. It's so strange, isn't it? It is a very difficult time to be saying, I want to join the technology marketing departments of tech startups or even more established companies. The pace of change has accelerated, and the impact of the change has accelerated. And we honestly don't know where things will end up. Things just a year ago, it was a very different world than it is today. Things move that quickly. So, but our hope has to always be in our kids, in the new folks on the team, in the new situations and the new approaches that we can bring. It sometimes can be difficult to be optimistic about the future, but the optimism has to be in if bad things can happen, then good things can happen too, right?
Absolutely.
And even on bad days, good things happen. I like to say that, perhaps just as a way of like picking myself up when it feels as if it's a very bumpy day. So we have to try and stay optimistic, and that has a lot to do with self-preservation, given all the inputs that we receive nowadays. We never used to receive as many inputs as we currently can, and that's overwhelming. And it can drown out our inner voice when we're always doing input, reading, hearing, listening, reading, writing. We don't do enough writing. I think, who said you should do an hour of reading a day and an hour of writing a day? He wrote on Walden Pond. I'm forgetting the author. Anyway, so the idea of having enough output and having quiet time is important. So I don't know how we build this into our future, but having quiet time so that we can figure out who we are within all of this.
So as we wrap up our conversation, do you have any other final advice for marketing leaders that are trying to create more positive impact and elevate the performance of their teams?
Understand and know more about your buyers. Introduce your teams to your customers. Could you have a monthly or depending on the availability of your customers, a customer become available to a call with your team or leaders or subparts of the team, so that they can say, here's what we do with your product. Here's how we like it. Here's some of the things that are going on. And then team members can ask questions. What about this? What about that? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? So that isn't always possible. Obviously, as a leader, you want to be able to share findings about your customers. Maybe members of your team have the job of doing that. Maybe you've got that function, that facility. Maybe that's part of what product marketing is doing. They're speaking to customers all the time and taking that information and trying to formulate it into messages and capabilities, and share that with the rest of the marketing team and sales and development and all sorts of other team members. But the more you can let all your team members understand the customer better, the more I feel as if our work as individual team members and the design work that we do, the copywriting we're doing, the website stuff we do, we feel as if it's connected to a purpose, and who we're really trying to help and what their perspectives are and some of the language they use and so forth. So it opens a window into who we doing this all for, in a way. That would be, a great idea if your environment can sustain it, allow it, and so forth. It's not always possible to have that happen. And for various reasons, many of them are justified and valid. But having that direct line for your team to be able to have insights from your customers can help calibrate and validate various ideas that you as a group are pulling together, and you get a chance to test. What do you think of this? What do you think of that before things go live? So that would be a really, really helpful step. If you're managing SDR teams, wow, that would be so helpful to the SDR teams, right? To be able to hear, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Tell us how you use this. What's it work? What do you like? Why do you like it? What did you do before? All that kind of stuff. And getting different customers to speak, because they've all got different perspectives and different histories, different situations, different environments they're doing things in. So that just makes the work feel more connected and meaningful.
Yeah, perfect place to wrap things up. It comes back to curiosity and really having a passion for continuous learning. David, thanks for joining and sharing your perspective on all things marketing in this dynamic marketplace that we're in, including this Mirage when it comes to attribution and how do we create lasting impact as marketing leaders. Thanks again. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much. I very much enjoyed it as well.
And a reminder, please continue to give the gift of feedback that helps make this podcast even better. You can do that by going out and giving a rating and a review. It's so easy to do on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And as always, make sure to visit marketimpactnow.com for the latest in business leadership perspectives. So long until next time.